Moving on to the Utah Utes taking on the Washington Huskies. Michael Penix is a star, right? He's a star. We know that. He was amazing last week. He was on target for the most part. Did miss a couple deep shots to Roma Dunze and Giles Jackson, but man, 22 of 30, 256, a couple touchdowns, also had a rushing touchdown. You got to feel great about what he did last week, and you would think that he's probably going to be back to playing at a crazy high level down the stretch. The other thing about Washington in big games, and I would constitute this as a really big game, Dylan Johnson's been huge when they've needed him to be huge. He had a career high 100 yards on October 14th against Oregon. And then last week against SC, they ran the ball as a team 42 times. And it paid off. Obviously, Dylan going for 250, the offensive line doing a great job. That was significant. But more importantly, the run game is always going to be secondary for Washington. When you have weapons like that and you have a quarterback like that, the run game will be secondary. But what helps the passing game? The run game. And what helps passing game a lot, especially when you want to manufacture big plays? Play action. How about Penix off play action this year? He's 80 of 108, 74% completion with 9 touchdowns, 0 picks, and 12.6 yards per attempt. So if they can get the run game going just a little bit, stay patient enough in the run game, it could open up some play action, and that's when Penix will really bury you down the field. Now, Washington's going to have to protect because Utah's defense is legit. They can kill you, absolutely kill you with some of the pressure that they can provide. They added 4 sacks again last week. Jonah Ellis had a 1.5 on the night. They're 8th in the country in sacks per game with nearly 3.5 sacks per game. Now, if you look at Michael Penix, when he gets pressured, he becomes more human. Against pressure, he's 36-78. That's 46%, 8.2 yards per attempt. When he's not pressured, he's 189 to 246. That's 77%, and 10.5 yards per attempt. So his completion percentage, when pressured, drops 31 percentage points. Utah, they have the edge rushers. We know that. Jonah Ellis and company, they have the edge rushers. But if you look at Washington, their tackles are excellent. So Utah's got to find a way to find pressure up the middle against the interior 3 of Washington. That's where they might be able to do the most damage. When you look at Washington on third down, they're one of the best offenses, but Utah is number 1 in the country on third down defense. They surrender 24% conversions. So Washington's going to need to stay out of third and long. And I think that's going to be really important. The other side of the coin is totally the opposite. Washington's terrible on third down. They're giving up 42%. That's 101st in college football. So can Utah kind of stay on schedule and make things a little bit difficult? Their offense, yeah, they're not great. They're not great right now on points per drive. It's not what you want. It's kind of maybe you soften the blow a little bit because they hung 55 last week on a totally beat up Arizona State team. But they're just so one-dimensional. And that's something that I'm real concerned about. Now, Utah, 352 rushing yards last week. That's great. Jaquindon Jackson, even though he left the game, he had 111 yards before he left the game with the injury. It's 8.5 yards a carry last week. Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson, they both had double-digit carries, double-digit rush yards. Barnes finished the game with 56 yards on 7 carries. So he can clearly show that he's capable in the event in which he needs to take off and run. And Johnson, we know he's got track star speed, 79 yards on 2 carries, including that 59-yard touchdown run. The other thing I think for Utah is they got to be able to win some one-on-ones on the outside. Now, Devon Vele, he had a really impressive game and was targeted 10 times, clearly starting to become that go-to guy on the outside with Bryson Barnes. But he's going to have to play out of his mind in this one because they're going to have to match Washington point for point. That could be really difficult. You look at Washington's defense, they can't allow 500 yards and 42 points on a regular basis. I don't care how many points they score. I don't care how good they are. You can't let Caleb Williams' performances recreate themselves down the stretch. They're more talented than that. Now, the numbers might not reflect it because they're 94th in the country as far as yards per game allowed. So they got to be better. And the other thing, too, when you're going against Washington, Washington's a really sneaky physical team. They're not like soft. I know a lot of people will think, well, they throw it all over the yard. They must be soft. They're not soft. I can promise you that. But I don't know if they're as physical as Utah. Now, Kyle Whittingham's Utah teams are almost always amongst the most physical in the country, and this year is no different. Now, they were embarrassed a couple weeks ago on a national stage by Oregon. And I would imagine that they really view this opportunity as a significant one because it could change the perception of not just their program, but kind of how they're viewed amongst the national media. Because I'm not sold on Utah at the moment. I'm going to be honest. I'm not sold on them at all. I think their offense is very, very, very inconsistent. So if they can get it going against Washington, that'll change my opinion. I think it'll change a lot of others' opinion as well. Utah is excellent as a road underdog over the last 10 years. They are 14-4 against the spread as a road dog, and they are 4-1 against the spread against teams with winning records this season. You might hear about Utah here in a little bit in our Giant Killers segment. You might hear about them. Just saying. Not teasing it, but you might say, I like Washington to win the game, but by how much? I might have to explain that one here in just a moment.